Welcome to episode 206 of Dial the Gates, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. Thank you for joining me. In this episode, we have James CD Robbins, who started off as an illustrator, then went into art director and production designer on Stargate, SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. For this episode, we are covering Season 6 and 7 concept art. And we have like 150 episodes, 150 images to go through with you. So we're going to get into this pretty quickly here. But first, if you enjoy Stargate and you want to see more content like this appearing on YouTube, do me a favor, click that like button. It really helps the show get noticed and will continue to help us grow our audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click that subscribe icon. And clips from this episode will be released over the course of the next few weeks on the Dial the Gate YouTube channel. This is a pre-recorded interview with James so that we could move through the content at our own pace and kind of figure things out. So the moderators will not be taking questions for him, but we do have a great deal of assets to show you, things that I didn't know were part of some of his images too, little Easter eggs along the way. I'm hoping you haven't seen most of this stuff, so you'll find a look at season 6 and 7 in a way that you haven't before. So enjoy. James CD Robbins, art director and production designer on Stargate, SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. James, it is a privilege to have you back, sir. You have no idea how long I've been looking forward. Well, you may have some idea how long I've been looking forward to this. How are you?
I'm well, David. Very nice to see you, and thank you for inviting me back.
Well, your work is such a tremendous part of what made this franchise great, and I have been looking forward to going through much of it with you. Earlier in the show's run, I went through Ken Rebel's artwork from seasons 1 through 5, and then he passed the torch in season 6 to you. So I think it's only fitting at this point to talk about what was going through your mind when you first came on in season 6, in terms of the projects that you had taken on before. How big was it and how enormous was it compared to some of the stuff that you worked on before? How daunting was it? And did you how did you feel how you were going to fit yourself into this this world? Because a lot of Ken stuff was drawn. Yours, you do have, you obviously draw, but this was much more Photoshop in terms of content that you were submitting. Tell us about some of the challenges in coming into season 6.
Well, I think the biggest challenge was just the show's canon. The fact that I was coming in season 6 and not season 1, and beginning developing all the looks for the various things. Obviously, we had a feature that set the bar for exactly what the show was to be, and then they carried on from there and enlarged their universe, as it were. I spent days after I first got there doing nothing but watching episodes to myself into where they were at visually, as well as from a story standpoint. Because honestly, when I was called in for the interview, I had no idea there was a series. I watched the original movie and was totally taken with it. I thought it was a great film, but I was just off in my own world. I was doing independent film at the time. I was doing a lot of commercial work internationally, and to come back and to get into something like this, I'd done a couple of small features as well, independent work, and so I was production designing at that point. Mm-hmm. And then Union, in their infinite wisdom, decided that because none of that work had been done within the parameters of the Union itself, they assigned me as an illustrator / graphics person. So that's how I know. that's how it
seem right.
No, they just ignored all that stuff previously, and I had actually applied for in the Union as a designer And they said, no, you're a graphics illustrator guy.
So I am I?
Apparently. And you know, in whatever level, there's a compliment in there somewhere, because obviously the portfolio that I submitted was full of my artwork and drawings, and that was apparently what was strong enough to get me in the door.
Okay.
They needed someone to create the visuals for them, and I still recall at one point, very shortly after I started, that I was like, oh my God. I mean, I've been designing, I've been doing everything, right? And now all of a sudden it's like, I just have to draw. Really? That's all they want me to? Cool, I'm down for that. So I started in, and yeah, it was a wonderful thing, because that's what I love the most out of everything. I mean, I'm a trained artist. I went to fine art college for 4 years in London as a youth, and graduated from that and started working in television in Toronto, CFTO TV, and Winnipeg at CKY Television. And I was doing everything from court drawings to doing storyboarding for in-house production and everything else in Winnipeg. And then finally made the move out to Vancouver after my parents passed, and started my life anew, and really never looked back. It's been wonderful. And honestly, the 10-year run at Stargate, little did I know at the time, has proved to be probably the best 10 years of my professional career.
Could you have guessed that going in to this little show that had moved to Sci-Fi Channel for a 6th season?
Oh, yeah, you say little show. Perhaps
show.
Little in the grand scale of things. It was the largest production I've been involved with, and the most heavily moneyed, and the most, I mean, resilient, as it turns out.
That's the word.
Yeah, so I mean, my wife is American, and we were just in the process of getting our relationship up and going at that time. And she decided, well, she's going to come up here. She's from Los Angeles, and she's going to come up here because I got this show, you know, couple of years maybe, and then, you know, we'll see what happens after that. Cut to 10 years later, the show finally breathed its last for the time being. For that time, yes. Yeah. Wow. Now it's all magical and potentially coming back in whatever form, which is a testament to the fan base, really.
Yeah, it's just a question of when. It's always been a question of when. It's one of the reasons that Amazon bought MGM, and we know that because all the trade articles when the purchase was being made were mentioning Stargate. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they've got something of a tiger by the tail here. It's just a question of how they want to utilize it. So, I am looking forward to going through your first 2 years of content. What the biggest change for me to pivot was the usage of Photoshop starting in season 6. Was this the medium that you were working in at the time? Was this something that you suggested? Was this something that Brad and Rob suggested? We want to see it more digitally rather than drawn. Where did Photoshop come into the picture?
It's just a way that I've developed working. I was working on a program that predated, well, if you want to go right back, I started like doing graphics on an Amiga years before.
Okay.
And then got into a program called Micrographics Picture Publisher, and I was using that as a drawing platform at the time. Photoshop, you know, what's that? I don't know. So I did manage to get obviously into Photoshop. And I've been using it for a number of years prior to starting at Stargate. So I didn't ask, nobody suggested. Okay. I just had this methodology kind of established where I would photograph my drawings, put them into Photoshop, and then create all the atmosphere, texture, color, whatever.
Got it.
Specific computer. So basically, what I did is I would work in sketch pads and or on large sheets of vellum that I would attach to my drafting table at Stargate, and work in charcoal, which was very messy, but very fast and very forgiving. If you want to make adjustments to a rendering, charcoal is probably one of the best ways to go. As far as detail and finishing, I wasn't worried because that was all going to happen afterwards once I uploaded the images into Photoshop to actually work on the texturing.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and bring in your content here. Best ad ever. And we'll see what we got. Can you see this?
I can see that. It's the Death Glider camp.
Yes, absolutely. So this is from the second episode of season 2, Redemption Part 2. We've done our best to organize these kind of into, well, definitely they're going to be the episodes in sequence. And then inside of that, I've tried to organize all the content together. We may do a little bit of bouncing around, but for the most part, this is going to be pretty locked in here. So, all right.
Yeah. So once again, I mean, 2 moons. I was sort of playing there. There was nothing designated. I knew that we needed to have the El-Kesh landed in the background and Death Gliders lined up. I honestly didn't know how they looked when they were parked.
Right?
So they just rest on their wingtips for my purposes. But this is really as a nod to our set deck department as to what we're anticipating seeing, and then obviously the crossover to the Biz effects as well. We're going to be putting in most of the Death Gliders and the ships and extra moons and what have you. To be fair, in the feature film, they were on the hill on their wingtips, so you're good. I mean, someone probably gave me that information. It was one of the details that escapes me presently, but there they were lined up in the cannon towers. It was something that had been established previously, I believe, and they gave me reference photos for those, so I included those in. And the large light, I think, was probably a misinterpretation of some existing infrastructure that they had already. It's much larger than anything we actually physically own, but the idea was there.
Absolutely.
And this one being where our Tilk's son steals the Death Glider from to put an end to Anubis' weapon. It's my recollection.
Now, this mountain range here is very reminiscent of the mountain range in Vancouver.
No. I thought all planets had pine trees and mountains. Nope. I knew we were going to be shooting on location. A lot of the times I would be supplied with location photos too. So this is where we're doing our camp. So I would actually be, more in the ballpark with the renderings. Whenever possible, I would work that way.
All right. Jaffa Encampment, the refugee camp from Redemption 2.
And once again, more of a feel thing for general layout. This was, once again, a location photograph with a partial moon in the sky. I think this is a day version, but I had another one, unless perhaps the lighting on this has changed. But I did a night version. You can see actually the tent with the figure in the background with the walls of the tent are glowing.
Oh, okay.
So I think this image made it just a bit bright considerably. But so that was just something for our decorators to sort of have laid out. And you can see on the far right is the funeral pyre.
Yes, Dreyok.
Yes.
How long does it take to develop an image like this?
How long is a piece of string?
Okay. So they're all different.
It varies incredibly. I mean, some of these, trying to remember back, it's anywhere between 3 and 4 hours and a full day, given whether I had time or not. I do recall that I worked more on the weapon platform that was firing into the Stargate than I did on these particular drawings, because that one had to be realized entirely by VisFX, where this is, like I say, more of a directional rendering for set decorating.
Okay.
MK's
Folly. Yes, that's right.
This one was a bit of a curveball that Bridget threw me, because I've been brought in as an illustrator. In high school, I took 1 term of drafting, and that was my full experience at that time with drafting. I really hadn't done anything else, architectural or any of that stuff. So after I finished doing another drawing we'll get to later, Bridget said, "Okay, now we're going to need this weapon. It should be large because it's got to defeat Anubis's weapon that's firing into the gate and causing the potential buildup to overload." So I believe this was McKay's concept in the episode, and giving McKay some nods here. He only had 4 hours, and he managed to build this thing. That's true.
That's true.
It may not be correct, but I believe he said he had like 4 hours.
That's about right.
So they put this thing together, and then Bridget says, "Okay, so draw this up, and then draft it so that they can build it." And I'm like, "What?" You better say, "What? I can do a rendering of it, but you want me to draft it?" She goes, "You'll figure it out." I'm like, "Okay." So soon as everybody had booked it for lunch and I was alone in the art department, I went to the drawers where we keep all our drawings, pulled out a bunch of them, and just started going through them and reminding myself. And quite honestly, I had a lot better recollection of notation and how it was done than I thought I would. So within a day, I think I was able to get this drawn up and drafted from side view, top view, and view, so that they could then begin building this. And the one thing that I did that caused a little vexation, the special effects guys built this, was putting two rotating arms on the same axis that went in opposite directions. How are we? But they did it. I still don't know how they figured it out, but you can see in the episode that these things are actually traveling. I can't even do that. It's like rubbing your head and your tummy at the same time. Anyway, they go in opposite directions.
So they actually physically built that. That's wild for one scene. Something so intricate. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, and they did an astounding job. So here's the one I spent quite a bit of time on. And quite honestly, a lot of the time was built just sort of like describing the crumbling nature of this and the understructure. Now, some of this made it into the final, as I recall, but it was nowhere near as, what's the word, atrophied, with this closet that's opened up to show all the underground workings of the weapon. But they took this, and then I had to do another drawing of a close-up of the firing unit itself, which is styled after this. Now, if you look at the unit on the very left frame here, they had built that as a physical piece to be on location. So that was sort of my jump off. They gave me photographs of that piece, and then I built the others to have a similar feel to them, at least. If they're not identical, they're certainly in the same family.
This has always been a bone of contention with Stargate fans. Why would the Ancients design such a complex weapon simply to dramatically destroy Stargates across the galaxy? And a lot of us have always been like, well, I suspect it did something else, and Anubis just bastardized it to do that. So.
Very possibly. I never got those notes, and that's something you would have to take up with one of the records.
Right, exactly.
I'll just draw pictures, mate. That's what I do. So once again, there's your Lower Mainland Mountains there, the whole bit.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So firing unit, a couple different angles. Once again, more is obviously an assist to our VisitPEX team, and making sure that we could see there's a little bit of it going underground that's rotted away, so we can reveal that aspect of it. And I think that was merely to make sure that once one part of it went, like Tilk Sun takes out the firing unit with the Death Glider, and then the whole thing goes. So they wanted that sense of connection.
The additional notations, I see them sometimes, and in some, especially like in weapons, that you're just like handheld stuff, and other times they're not present. Are you left free to input the amount of technical detail for the other departments as you wish, or is there a certain amount of, well, if you're going to create this on these X, Y, or Z, we do need additional input in terms of height, things like that, that you can go ahead and put on the image? Where's the line drawn, pardon the pun, for that?
Well, I think once again, it's something that varies depending upon what it is that I was rendering.
Okay.
Something like this, I put up height indicators just so they would have a sense of scale, because nowhere else does it tell you how big any of this is, unless you want to go back to the previous image and then try and scale it from trees,
right?
Which is kind of ambiguous, but that does give you a sense that this thing is fairly large.
Yep.
In theory, that unit on that, if you go back to the previous drawing again real quick, this is a physical 12-foot build on the left.
Okay.
So above ground was 12 feet. So,
and we have a reference for the size of the Stargate in the pit there. So the Stargate is 22, 23 feet across. So this is a big mama.
Yeah. And then Death Glider, that was for the Glider Bay, I believe I did drawings for as well.
Yes. Okay. So this is actually from the next. Yes. This is Descent.
Yes. That was episode 3, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
The Glider Bay itself. Now, I was very fortunate in that the model of the Death Glider hung just to my right, about 4 feet to my right, and off the roof in the art department. So there was my reference image right there, which I had, and I was able to look at from a bunch of different angles and then extrapolate stuff like this.
Yeah, it was folded this way in the feature film, and we saw that more realized in the season 1 finale and season 2 opener, Serpent's Grasp and Serpent's Lair. So it's fitting that we see it that way. And then, you know, we see them also deployed in their flight position as well. They could. Not every glider bay is designed the same. Let's put it that way. So.
And this is my first glider bay. So.
All right, got to start somewhere.
And underwater with the shield intact as became a story point.
That episode still contains some of the greatest visual effects in the show. Period.
And physical effects. Was this not the one where
the rings?
Well, Jonas was underwater trying to repair this, right?
Yep, and the rings and that whole practical effect of just throwing a whole tank of water on him on set. And for years I thought that was a digital effect, and it's like, no, James Titchener and I think we talked about that one. It's like, no, that was actually achieved. They just painted out the water until a certain point, and then just threw him into it. So what a sequence, though.
Yeah, and we had a set that we actually immersed in a tank at UBC, I believe.
Yes.
For the swimming sequence.
For Rick and Amanda, yeah. Your father's cutting it a little close.
And Jonas actually held his breath for upwards of 2 minutes doing those takes.
Yeah, Corin Nimick did the whole thing. Joseph Malazzi said they had to cut because one of the crystals shook in one of the scenes. I was like, oh man.
Do it again.
Right, exactly. So no, they had to cut the take, but he actually had done the whole thing. So we just couldn't see it in the end result.
And so another view of the same glider bay. In the final episode, I believe the glider bay was much smaller. There were fewer gliders, and it was a much smaller environment. But the notes, the broad strokes in there.
Pardon the pun. The thing that I love about Photoshop is the copy paste feature. I mean, you can render so much more detail and spend so much more time on other things when you've already got one element created. You can stamp it out and change some of the lighting and other and little details, and then spend much more of your time creating more content for the image.
Mood and atmosphere and everything else. The only thing you got to watch when you're doing that is perspectives, because if you keep copying and pasting things to different places, they stop working at a certain point.
Correct.
And requires another drawing that has to be slightly different angles. But to your point, I believe I just copied and pasted all the gliders from the left and stuck them in there. Okay.
Right.
This was never really realized in my mind in the episode. When they got to the console, there was a column that sat inside. There you go. They opened it up and they were working on that. And this was supposed to be this crystalline entity thing outside the window. And it never had the sense of structure that this does.
Right.
It was more glowing sort of crystalline thing. But I mean, a lot of the time I'll draw things that become simplified because for me to draw them is easy, and for VisFX to necessarily render them, and if they have to become 3D, that equates to money directly.
Correct.
So a lot of the time, my drawings, I was rarely reined in very much, but sometimes I was. But they would just take what I did as sort of a generalized direction and say, okay, well, we got crystal something out there, and they where they could realize it without blowing the bank.
Yeah, the frustrating thing about this shot in the episode is it's a locked shot, so we don't get a great deal of perspective. But with your tearaway here, we can see kind of what was envisioned, and it's cool. It's very good. It's almost a crystal animal out there that's powering the ship. One of my favorites. This is Ayana from Frozen, episode 4, and you had rendered her in ancient an ancient headdress and necklace.
Yes, which did not appear in the final episode, but apparently there was a thing about hats, which I never really got, but for the most part, they were not down with people wearing helmets and hats if it could be avoided, just because I guess they look different on everybody, and they weren't always the most complimentary thing. And also, again, there would have been another expense to put into this, and I know that this was a fairly expensive episode, even from the having to freeze multiple blocks of ice over periods of weeks. One of them had a mannequin in it. 2 of them had mannequins in it. Then we did an ice gel build for our actress that she laid in, and almost the same position. Her hand was up closer to her head with the fingers sticking up, I think, as I recall.
Yes.
But the rough muslin cloth and everything else, that was all realized. And I spent a lot of time just playing with the surface of the ice, trying to make it look sort of like dirty and old and cool and a whole bit. And I think the team took a lot of the nuance from my drawings as best they were able to put in. So she was actually almost in this exact position when she was revealed in the episode, which is always fun.
So is this Bill Mizell by any chance?
Yes, it is. This is Krusty Bill.
Krusty Bill from Krusty Bill's Bar.
Yeah.
This is Nightwalkers.
Now, I was new to the show, and I wasn't on set a lot, so I had not actually met Bill Mizell other than the scening in the hallways at this point. So Bridget's like, I want to do this, and I want Bill to be the guy in the sign. I guess this goes back to my court drawing days when they would bring somebody in on a remand, and I would have literally a minute and a half to do a drawing of somebody before they go, okay, over to the third for particulars. Thank you. Next.
Wow.
And the guy. So I went, Bridget said, well, come with me, go down the hall. I'm with her. And she goes to Bill's office and on the pretense of talking about something. And I'm just hanging out in the doorway. And all I'm doing is I'm scoping him. I'm looking at him, trying to get, okay, this, that. And then I went back to the art department and did the drawing because Bridget didn't want him to know that we were going to make him into Krusty Bill. So I did an original pencil drawing, and then I added the fisherman's hat and the slicker and the pipe, and Bill was now Krusty Bill. And this was sent along to the paint department to create the sign for the exterior of the bar.
This the shadow, is that done in charcoal or is that pencil as well?
This is a charcoal drawing.
Okay.
This actually, and I think this took me all of 10 minutes.
Oh man. Wow. All right. So this is you have an empty barn here, and then we fill it with stuff here.
Exactly. So what I did in this particular instance was render the background, the warehouse in a 3D program I was using at the time to get some of the atmosphere and the lighting through the cracks in the boards and all that stuff put in. And then dump the ship into it. And once again, fairly close angle, I believe, on what finally wound up showing up in the episode.
Yeah, it looks vaguely gold in the episode. I think here was more ambitious than what the ultimate product was.
Yeah, and I started out without knowing what the location was.
Got it.
Now it's got some size to it, right?
Oh yeah.
Look at the little people down the bottom.
Oh yeah.
But it was deemed to be too large for the storyline. So this is just all the townsfolk being subjected to symbiotes that got them.
Correct.
This is closer now at this point, but I think still a little overscale. But I used that drawing and scaled it down to fit into the warehouse that we had.
Got it.
Yeah.
So some of the assets that you're going to see have the PropWorks watermark on it. PropWorks was the company that I worked at where we sold a lot of James's art, and a lot of these assets I preserved before shipping the physical asset off. So you're going to see them occasionally here.
That's fine. That's fine. I was going to say, I don't remember putting that PropWorks.
You definitely did not.
So this is the gravity well from
this
Abyss?
is Abyss. That's correct.
Hey, I'm doing pretty good so
You're doing
far.
good.
It says Abyss right there. Okay.
Yeah, but you didn't look at it.
So yeah, this was a set that I had done a number of both illustrations and concepts for the well itself that RDA gets stuck to while Ball has his fun with him. And this went through a number of different art incarnations. Some of them were too busy. They didn't want it to detract from either being able to see the forced perspective gravity well that built behind this grate. So we wound up with a simplified version, and then the guys in the metal shop produced the structure and then put the finer stuff over top of the structure, because that would be strong enough to support our line on it.
The ceiling of the torture chamber.
Yep. Same room. So that's the light. I did not draw up the light itself, I don't believe, but I did a rendering from someone else's designs. And they went on. This is just to sort of see how it would be illuminated.
I'm almost seeing Atlantis stained glass beginning to form in this.
A little bit of something going on there. Yeah. And once again, I don't believe, I have to remember, the designs for these windows came to me from other draftspeople, and I just put the color in. It's basically so they're pretty straightforward. But there's an overall view, which we may or may not have. There we go. You can start to see how it all played together. So I scaled everything, put it in. And this is accurate right down to the bases on the columns, the central dais. So it wound up being very representative.
I remember watching this episode, and this shot is basically in it. Ball is here, O'Neill's here. This is a scary episode. When Ball comes out, we don't know what he's capable of.
Ball for the first time here.
No, this is his first solo appearance. We were introduced to him in Summit and Last Stand in season 5.
Oh, I didn't think O'Neill knew who he was.
O'Neill did not know him before, but O'Neill, Daniel had met him. But this is their first introduction to each other.
Gotcha. And that had been previous to season 6.
Season 5. Yep.
See, filling in those little gaps.
Absolutely.
The prison, and Bridget wanted a prison here that had no bars, non-traditional prison. So I drew this with the uplights and the beams. And I'm trying to remember when Mr. Menard was our DP on this episode. But it was a little bit of a trick for them to get lights to focus in this way inside of these walled builds that are all made out of wood. And you put very, very bright, very hot lights in there. And I guess there was some consideration as to whether or not it would burn the place down. Jeez.
Now, when you're creating this, the the likenesses of the characters are pretty darn faithful, all things considered. Is it just a question of, where do you draw the line? I find myself using all these puns. Where do you draw the line in terms of, okay, so we have an idea who these people are, or no, that's basically them. I mean, in terms of the fidelity of creating
process of elimination, that's Jonas sitting with his back to us.
Yeah, exactly.
No there. But obviously we have no lack of photographs of our main actors in and about the building, so I was able to just pull references and do drawings. Portraiture is one of the things I really do love on this planet. So whenever I have a chance to try to utilize that, I will. The speed at which I was required to do these drawings didn't really allow for, concise portraiture, but I could get it in the ballpark.
Got it.
The colonnade on the mothership.
I think it was the mothership, yes.
Yeah.
So.
And then this is from episode 8. This is the next episode.
These are all the other guys. So
other
the
guys.
Prison and this are all the same show. So yeah, that's here.
That column that opened up to reveal the thing when Felger and
Coombs, that's it. You're better at this than I am.
It was on the drawing.
Okay, I'm not reading. I had another one. I'm not going to find it. Okay, I guess this is it. Yeah. So this is like the wider shot of them reviewing and these hot talk elements were taken previously. So
yeah, and once again, that was just to show that there's a screen there that they're supposedly doing diagnostics on the mothership to open and close different portals and do things. And this was the reveal of it opening and the light coming on, which once again, they don't look like the characters kind of at all, except I knew one of them was wearing glasses.
There you go. And decked out in Jaffa gear, so.
Decked out in the Jaffa gear.
And the exterior.
Yeah, this is Khonsu's planet.
Yeah.
And this is where we first find the episode opening, I think, when they were working with the rings. That was the other thing. It was draw up the ground rings. We did not have dimensional rings. We had vinyl rings that they laid down on the floor. So I drew this up in a 3D program, and they built this physical structure from these drawings.
I think this is the first instance that we see the ring platform that it's not underneath the floor. In previous seasons, they always faked it, like it was like kind of like a holographic floor, and the rings would come through. But now in this episode, this is the first instance where we get the platform here itself physically. So I love this design.
And the reason for that, needing the dimension, was primarily for what you've got on screen right there. So we could physically open up a little crystal box that Felger messed with and said, yep, they're still in range. Let's go.
And you guys use that throughout the rest of the show.
But we used it where it was convenient to use, because they'd already established the vinyl ring inside the ships on the floor. There's that zero trip hazard on that.
Yes.
They probably didn't want to use this unless it was on a location sort of environment. Now, I'm not saying that was absolutely the case, but that's what I recollect.
Yeah, this was used a lot on the cargo ship.
The physical one?
If I recall correctly. Yeah, because O'Neill in Lost City, O'Neill's got it opened up, and he's reconfiguring it.
That's what would predicate its use, is whether or not they do it.
Okay. There we go. There's the answer. All right. Yeah, you don't want your actors tripping, for sure. So the Ashrak Assassin Knife from Allegiance, Dan Payne's knife.
Yes. Just had some fun with it. I had to do a knife. Honestly, I once I'd seen the final episode, I thought it was a little too ornate and pretty for what it was supposed to be, but I didn't have that information when I drew it.
Got it.
So a lot of the time we're working far enough ahead, obviously, to get these toys built, that we don't have fully finished scripts every time. So I drew up a knife that looked pretty wicked and dangerous, a lot of sharp, pointy bits. Made it a bronze or brass sort of finish, which is probably not the best material to use. Maybe it's an alien version of it.
Well, you had
softer metal.
You had an Ashrak reference here, and there was an Ashrak ring that was built in season 2 of the show, and you are evoking it in these shapes here. So on the, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where that's coming from. So
well, and I get that that's where it's coming from, but still, at the end of the day, it felt more like an ornamental knife than something that an assassin would be using on a
got it.
Basis. It just, I mean, that's just my own personal like.
Oh, absolutely.
If I'd known that, I might have changed it because God knows I've done enough swords and knives.
So the Queen Egeria, and here we have a lot of notations in terms of direction for this.
That's all me. I drew her up. She was supposed to be this dying thing. I think I got a note that she was to be like bloated and on her last legs. Exactly. So I tried to get as much detail as I could for the biz effects people or model shop, because at the initial stage we weren't sure how it was going to work.
She was ultimately a digital creature, right?
So 100% digital, and then I had to draw up the tank that she went in as something that we could physically build, and they did that. They changed it from silvery toned to a brass tone in the show, I believe. And then the aftermath of her once the Tok'ra girl had taken the queen and assimilated her.
Yes.
I believe that sloppy goo was a physical piece that we had lying on the floor with a symbiote. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you got the symbiote and you got her birthing sac, and that's it. So
yeah, and there's the drawings to do the build from. So once again, in the interest of time and ease, I believe I did all of this in a 3D rendering program. And then that once again, now here's one for the books. Bridget's like, okay, well, we want to do this ruins on location and make it feel kind of like Machu Picchu. And I'm like what? And I'm like, okay, that's a thing. I've been around it quite a bit. Honestly, this one had escaped my radar up to this time, so I researched it a little bit. This is what I came up with as our version of a Machu Picchu.
I love it.
Yeah, it was fun. Didn't get quite enough time to finish some aspects of it, but that's okay. And this one, the next one that you put up there,
Pangar itself, yeah.
So that's the waterfall house by Frank Lloyd Wright on the left, that I modeled from as a rough sort of guide or reference.
Okay.
And as it was called the waterfall house, I'm like, well, okay, let's give it a waterfall. And this beautiful view down to, I'm sorry, is that Rio?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, that's kind of where I started. So
I like your dirigible back here.
We needed some floating airships in there, so I've got the Goodyear blimp and that one. For game coverage, you got to have a dirigible.
You've got Stargate's really good about doing dirigibles. We just watched on Wormhole Extremists. What was the episode? It was in season 3, and they had airships as well. So they pop up from time to time, and later on we'll have more of that in your art here. So.
Oh, the Tagrium planet.
That's it. See, you got this. See what you talk. You don't need me for anything.
Anyway, I quite enjoyed that particular mat, and I believe it was really, really closely represented in the final.
They did a pretty good job. Yep.
Once again, this is the ruin in the Machu Picchu environment.
Yes.
That they were working on to translate. Ultimately, this told them that the symbiote that they've been
Yep. Here lies Egeria, entombed for all eternity. Ra used to live on Bangar. Ah, Promi.
There she is. There she is, X-303. In her slightly unfinished state on her first maiden voyage.
Was this the first render that you did of this ship?
Oh, God, I did so many, David. Probably one of them. I also had one of it when I was kind of trying to give it its own look to the hyperdrive.
Okay.
I had it riding rails instead that came out of the outboard Nasals there, I suppose. But, I mean, yeah, this is pretty much it. Once again, all 3D, which I thought was probably the best way to go, just from having to do variations or permutations. It would have been a lot quicker if I have a 3D model. And what really helped me on this, or helped the show, was I used wireframes from the images that I generated. Instead of generating with the texture, all of these were just the wireframes for the actual 3D models. And I'd throw things like the coils and other details into it. And sort of trying to give it sense of scale and everything else.
Now, if I recall correctly, you indicated that Prometheus was much more function over form. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was instructed that it was to feel more like a standard modern day battleship or aircraft carrier from a finish standpoint. So it's not about pretty. It's about, how is it going to work?
Okay.
And the one thing that I really did like about it is it looked bulky. It looked heavy, and even more so than in my drawings when the realized versions, when it comes out of the ground, when it's being stolen in the actual show, they do a side view of it just rising up past camera.
It's enormous.
My goodness, it looked like just a monstrosity. I mean, it was huge. So that was some of the concepts of the top opening up. I think we actually it slid away. You saw that only from the bay that it was in.
Yes.
They opened the roofs, and you saw it starting to go, and then we cut to the side, and it's just rising. And so it was just the back section of the ship that was in shot, rising up.
In hindsight, it's a great introduction to our entrance, basically humanity's entrance into the space age with our ships. Because once we don't unring this bell. Now we have ships for the rest of the franchise.
Reverse design technology from Asgard's. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And then this changed remarkably. Other than the fact that the foreground with all the replicator ships forming the planet, featureless planet, that was in. I think Carter kneels down and goes.
Yeah, she brushes it away and says, "We've got a problem."
And then the building, I had done a separate drawing for the building. There you go. It was supposed to be based on some ancient. It was This is where the Asgards used to live, right?
Yes, yeah. It's the only thing that really was left on the planet's surface.
So. And I don't know if I related this somehow to Asgard.
They ultimately went with a couple of, if I recall the episode, a couple of like spires that were folded in on each other. Yeah, exactly.
That were crossed like this instead, which honestly, personally, I was like, that's great. But when we got inside, it was all columns and
exactly
linear. So I was a little bit surprised that they changed the mat because it really didn't marry well in my mind with the physicality of the set. Which is something we always strive to do. You want the inside to feel like the outside. You can.
This is one of the few examples in terms of my recollection of doing this where you did one thing and then they went off and did something completely different. Now, what's the politics like that on set, if you don't mind sharing? Where
I am not in that loop on set. Those decisions are made between Brad and the writers or whoever was the producer for the show. They would go through it and decide what they liked and what they didn't. The drawings that I did were approved, and probably sent to post and biz and whatnot. But at the end of the day, they changed the feel of it. That also happened with Wraith ships.
Oh, okay, exactly. I would just be, as an artist, I would have to think that there would be a certain number of drawings that I would have to submit that they would completely change before I would be like, okay, do you guys like any of my stuff? But obviously, more often than not, they use your stuff. But I would think that for me,
I mean, there was a process. Every time I did a drawing, I didn't just do it and I send it out.
Okay.
I got to go. When I'm at the early stage, usually before I spend all the time working the drawings up, I would take my charcoal so many times, covered in charcoal. It's on my face, it's all over my hands, walking down the hallways, going, excuse me, with, you know, a huge 30 by 40 sheet of paper covered in live charcoal that will brush off on anybody, you know, I go by. And that's what I would walk into the offices with. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And yeah, I had a pretty good hit miss ratio, I think. Certain days were better than others, but I would say my initial concept success rate was upwards of 70%.
Yeah, and considering how, I mean, you can clearly see as the show went along how much more in the direction of their work, your work was going as your experience with them and began to meld even more and more. So,
and the fact that as the years went by, I had more responsibilities.
Of course,
on set world, and I mean, and Brad has even told me in hindsight, you know, it's like I had a lot of autonomy on the show, didn't I? Because I've now gone off past Stargate and worked on other things, and it's like, oh no, it's got to go through 19 layers of whatever. Whereas, you know, it was me and Brad or me and Paul or whoever, we just get it done very quickly, and
absolutely.
A lot of the time, stuff just went straight through. So it was great. Time dilation device.
Yes,
everybody have one. Yeah, I mean, all the notes and stuff on there. I don't know that I ever saw her load the mini CD into it. If that was covered,
I don't think so. I think we just saw her interacting with the
something that
the clock.
Like yeah, and I think she was doing some stuff in the episode. I would have to go back and look at it, but this was supposedly they wanted a nice low tech thing that they put in there, and this was to be our jumper that went in on top of it because the time dilation device wasn't made by us.
No, it was Asgard, and this was
by the Asgard,
our
right?
melding of that technology. So with Thor's notes, we brought this thing. So
yeah, this was our hacker box, if you will, that we wanted to put in to restart the timer. So
sight unseen.
Hey, critters.
That's right.
Critters. Yeah. So I did a number of renderings. This is actually, that last one was the stairway going up to level. And I got a couple of bugs interacting with each other because I thought that was interesting too, is that the bugs never really did anything to people other than make them feel like they're crazy or scare the crap out of them. So I was all about like, what if they hunt each other? What if this other international world is, you know, none of that made it through, I don't think. There's a whole bunch of drawings. If you want to flip to the next one.
This is a great sci-fi idea where these creatures are from Earth, but we just never perceived them.
Yeah, exactly. Except this one showed up on some guy's front windshield.
That's right.
It could really mess your day up, I suppose. I would have driven off the road. I don't know what happened to our guy. Well, there again, the same thing developed that we saw earlier without the background. And this one wound up being in. I think VisFX had come back to me and said they wanted some something that flies like a dragonfly or something like that. So I did this very strange hoverfly. The teeth are a little ridiculous. I like the spikes on the back end, but I might have gone back and redone the mouth on this thing, given an option. So, and you can see where I work from. I have electron microscope shots and things like that. I would smaller critters on those smaller critters, and then just played with them. So once again, this one was never in. That one I don't think ever made the show. It was just those two we just saw, the slug and the dragonfly thing. Yeah, those two. That's my recollection anyway. I liked him. I like this one.
He looks like he's having a bad day.
So this is actually a pencil sketch that I've done.
Okay.
So not very big. It's probably the whole drawing is probably.
Oh, okay. Paradise Lost. Near T.
Palace, yes. Once again, the mat for this one, I I'm going to guess it was an expense thing, but this became a very distant shot of Nertes Palace. You could still see that it kind of had the spires and whatnot, but
yeah, you got the Eastern influence for sure.
A little visit to Istanbul. So
no, wait a second. Paradise Lost. No, I think Paradise Lost. No, this is
Nertes Palace.
Yeah, but Paradise Lost. This is the episode with O'Neill and Mayborn. So I think that this one was mislabeled because it's Unnatural Selection that Nertes Palace appears. So, but we'll get back to that.
That's weird because those are the original. Go back again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the original title block from the show.
Right, exactly. So
strange that July 10th. Go to the next one again. June 17th.
Right. So.
Huh.
Now maybe it just wasn't updated in Photoshop.
We have an anomaly here.
We do. Okay, so we'll go back to that. So this is the Furling the Furling transportation arch room, or the Furling gate room, as it were. And we're gonna do a little bit of bouncing around here.
Okay.
But this is where Mayborn tries to get away.
Yeah.
And then to the moon.
And this is the diary that O'Neill finds, I believe.
Yeah.
And Bridget didn't want to do a book. She wanted something a little more elaborate. And I think she might have done a thumbnail for me of that device, or the way that they stack it, little sheets that are in the wood frame. And they did a great job building it. And then I came up with all the iconery and whatnot that supposedly was storytelling. And once, as you said earlier, cut and paste. Yeah, I drew probably 30 different little figures and then just cut them out, put them back in all the way around.
We don't see O'Neill doing a lot of investigating, and he definitely does in this episode. He doesn't have Carter there to do it for him.
I think, exactly. Probably missing her right about that.
So the ruins on the moon?
This is Minikata, I believe, which is an area. Once again, I had a location photo, and I just had to build the arches and the signs of this long defunct village that they come upon. But that's our beautiful backyard here in British Columbia.
Wow.
Yeah.
We never got to see this guy rendered.
No, he was in the episode, but
he was
never. Yeah, but he was never rendered like this. He became pretty much like a human pig. I don't know if they found stock footage of a pig and tried to upgrade it a little bit, but it was a very fast rushing.
Okay, this is the pig that we see real quickly. Okay.
Yeah, that was supposedly this, and it lost all of its scale. I mean, I pictured this as being really large.
Me too.
Once again, I did not put any scale markers on it, so whatever scale they came to, and I think it was driven probably by stock footage. I'm going to guess. I don't know that for a fact, but none of the details that I have in this drawing are really on the final one. It might have added a couple extra tusks, and certainly none of the coloration that was here. That was, Bridget asked me to put the purple and the orange on the belly.
But, so this says Tremodian boar. Does that come to you on a note, or are you allowed to name stuff?
No, this one Bridget named, and she gave me a little Post-it note with a scribble and some of the things like she wanted porcupine quills on the back and whatnot.
Got it.
Other than that, I think she might have also included a recipe. Yeah.
Right.
That was, Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis. That's what, not Unnatural Selection. Metamorphosis. These are Nertes patients.
Yes.
So we have a whole series here of transformed humans.
Yeah, and the hand there was used. Our gentleman on the left was not. The first one was not. That one didn't make it. That didn't make that. No, they kind of started looking at me sideways after I did that. So not so much for that either. This one, I think, there was a version that was done.
Alex Zahara.
Yeah. I don't recall if he still had the eye patch on that side or not. I kind of like the idea of like once you show off horror, it's less horrifying.
Yep.
So like let the audience sort of imagine what's underneath that. And then
This poor guy has no skin.
I know, right? But he's very muscly.
He is.
Yeah, so just variations on these people that she was playing with. And then I don't know if you actually had an image of the final. No, you did. So there was one more image that I did of what became the actual hero one.
Okay.
The gentleman who had an eye in the side of his head.
Ah, yes. Wodan. Yeah.
In the drawing, I had the eye in the side of the head, and his ear and whatnot actually morphed it to be almost like a nose. So I was trying to make it look like there was a total second face happening there. And that if we could get like the intelligent gleam from this when the guy's face looks like a drooling idiot, it's like you've got him trapped inside this body.
Wow.
Regardless, that's the one that they decided to go with. And Todd Masters built the prosthetic based on my designs. And it actually won a Leo for best design.
There we go.
Which went to Todd. It's like, hello.
Forsaken, the Cerberus.
Cerberus, yes. Oh, this is a funky set. This vessel had crashed and was at an angle.
Yes.
So we built the set at like 30-degree angle or something like that, which it was cool. I mean, that's why we had stuff hanging in there, so you could get paid for the fact that nothing is straight up and down and vertical. But it caused a very strange problem with people being in the set for any length of time, as they would all, what's the word I'm looking for? They start to get sick to their stomach.
Yeah, because the orientation would be off.
Vertigo.
Yep.
Which was totally unexpected. But anyway, notes for everybody, what they're doing in there, and then a final finished color version. I think Boyd changed the standard sort of yellow caution to a green caution to make it a little more alien. But other than that, this is pretty much what we got up today.
The Changeling, Kreshta, the ambush of Kreshta.
Yes, Mr. Judge's script, I believe.
Yes.
So I had to do a battle zone, and if you look hard enough, there's a few little rats crawling around in there too. One on the left. Go left.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Never noticed that.
Go down. There's another one. So in my mind, I didn't know how long ago this battlefield had occurred, but obviously in my mind, it was long enough for the rats to come and start chewing things up. So
wow.
And yet the fires are still burning. So, but you can see I've atrophied that guy in the foreground quite a bit. He's
absolutely. Yeah, Teal'c was laying there for several days with Braytak. So
you're dead in the sun for several days. I guess this could happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was fun.
Tigria.
And my self-portrait.
You're in there?
Way down to the little red slash. Way down. Oh, who's that in the door?
Is that you?
That's me having a smoke.
I never knew that. Oh, that's that's funny, James.
Silly details, but I took the time to do it, so I thought I'd mention it.
Wow.
So I like the industrial nature of this. I mean, I could see this radiating out from that center core of buildings in every direction. So
when you guys create episodes and you create new civilizations, you create script for the species. Now, that happened repeatedly throughout the show, as it does in many shows. Do these go off to, especially when we see computer displays and things like that, who's responsible for converting these into fonts?
Well, not all of them are converted into fonts per se. Boyd Godfrey was our graphic god on Stargate, and he was amazing. He would just come up with different scripts with different feel, seemingly at the drop of a hat. Now, I know years and years and years of experience of him as a graphic artist and enabled him to do that. But I would just have him send me sheets of, we need a new language for this thing, and send me sheets of it, and I would either use what he sent me or do hand-drawn versions. I think some of these were done by hand.
Yes.
But, jumping off from what he had already provided. And then if there are any places where we see signage, then it ties in with what we're doing there.
Got it.
And like I say, not all of them have an alphabet assigned. You can't decipher a lot of these. They're just gibberish.
Right.
Simple.
Right. Like the ancient one is font transposition throughout the show. I mean, you can see made in China on some of them, and yeah.
But it becomes a headache for production, because then you actually have to make it say something every time, right?
Yep.
It's just being able to put up a bunch of symbols. You got to be careful, or you can get caught. Yep. So this is the first versions of the Tenjian fighter, pardon me. And then the word dirigible came back, and they wanted this attached to a dirigible. So I altered it and put the dirigible in, and then I think they went back again and wanted it just free floating. So this was the final one. And once again, there's some voids, symbols across the ship. And that is one thing that I do love, is signage in our universe, on our world, the real world, is we're inundated. Everywhere you go, you see signs.
Of course.
And to have ships and elements from different planets that are actually incorporating that, to me, just brings up the level of believability.
I just love your detail here, though. Note, craft represented has fired 2 of its front missile loadout, which is why you have these holes.
Otherwise, we were like, what are those?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't have to answer that question. And 20% larger than a death flag, for whatever it's worth.
For scale, yeah. Prophecy.
And the mining camp.
Yeah. Lord Mott.
They did a pretty similar version of this, a little more detailed than mine, I think. This, for whatever reason, I believe I was pretty rushed when I was doing this one. So this is as far as I was able to take it. But I've said that to you before. It's that was always the biggest vexation, is that I would get into doing these drawings and it's like, oh damn, I got 19 more to do. I gotta move on.
Right. Yeah, time is money. You've only have so much.
Realize these images and these environments to the level I potentially would have liked to, really was not an option on an ongoing basis. There were some that I could stop on and spend more time depending upon the load, because there's also episodes where they really didn't need much from me. So those ones would give me time to work on other episodes that did.
Typically, how much time were you working ahead of them going to camera?
Once again, that varied quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
I would say we'd get our scripts usually 4 weeks or so out.
Okay.
To the point where they were solid enough that we could rely on them. But there were other elements of, and I'll just, as an example, the Super Soldier.
Yes.
I had 2 months.
Okay.
To develop that. And then by the time we ate through the first month of doing drawings, I did sculptures for it. We're probably going to come to that, but
yep.
That's Apple.
Full circle.
Full circle.
Season
this became
finale.
A very, very well recognized prop. This one and the obsidian tablet, I think. People like tablets.
Yes.
So did this one. There you go. It's got some ancient writing on it. Boyd gave it to me. I just made it look like it was inset in stone or carved in stone. And then
this was just styrofoam, wasn't it?
Probably a hard foam of some sort.
Okay.
CNC into.
Wow.
Because this was not done by hand on the final thing. Just set it on there. There's the barcode lettering that Boyd had come up with for ancients.
The Eye of Ra.
This was a beautiful problem. And it never really played the way it was meant to, I don't think. Not initially played out yet. This is supposed to be a piece that went into another existing prop base from earlier shows. I'm not even going to try and guess the name where the base came from. Maybe it's in one of my other drawings. But how'd you get that?
I was in the right time and place when it was sold. I think that there were 2 of these that were made. The other one has the metal ring around it. I know the guy who has it though, but yeah, this is one of my favorite pieces in my collection, based on the Eye of Tiamat from in terms of the shape from season 5. So they brought these back. So very, very cool.
It may have been based on that, but mine was based on Egyptian. I went straight to the source.
Oh, okay. I mean, like this metal, the ring that goes around it. Like,
I see.
The principle of that kind of technology.
Yeah, but so. the one on the right was detailed from references that I found from Egyptology.
Okay.
And then I guess the rest of it with the star or the sun or whatever. So, as you say, more modern additions to it.
So this was a radical, different design for Anubis's mothership.
Well, this was never used. There's probably a really good reason for it. I had no idea at this point of scale of how it was to play or anything else. So I did, and this is the thing. A lot of the time when I didn't know, I would just do something. Mm-hmm. And I would take that something down the hall, and what that would do was that would spur better direction. Mm-hmm. No, not that. More like this. And then I would get more information as to what it is. Oh, it has to be able to do this, and yada, yada, yada. So there were a couple of these, which are, I think they may have been reused or slightly changed and reused in Space Race or another.
Right,
show.
Exactly.
Yeah. So nothing's wasted. And there you go. I hit on this, and the idea of being able to dock a Hatak or several Hataks at this, so it's almost not just like a mothership, it's like a space. And then the ability of it to actually extrude and extend and open at the top to reveal the major weapon, and the Bizapex guys. And I like the fact that it was black against space, because it was even just, I mean, it's even more evil, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. The Death Flower.
Yeah, and that was one idea for the interior to be all gold. I was just playing with visuals, but we wound up the black one. The black version was what we did. Yeah, like that.
Got some Asgard ships here.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, did you not know what the enemy was going to be, or?
No, I just, or I had a note. What if Anubis' new mothership destroys the Asgard?
Oh, okay, got it.
So I'm guessing that somewhere in there that they took the Asgard on. I don't recall.
Anubis took the Asgard on at the end of season 5.
There you go.
Yeah.
But he didn't have this then.
Correct. And this is taken from something that we saw in season 1 of SG-1. So I'm wondering if this prop existed.
Well, this is it. What we were going to do is repurpose this base so that the Eye of Ra that you have in your hand there would go down into the center of this, and other crazy visual effects things would happen. That all got thrown away before we got to camera. They said, no, we're not going to go on that. And it was their idea. It was brought to me that they wanted to do it this way. And then for whatever reason, once they had the eye, they decided that that's not how it was going to work.
Got it.
Don't believe we resurrected this base.
No, but it's still cool to see the thought process that went into it.
Yeah, there's so much thought process that never makes it to the screen.
Absolutely.
Have to fun it.
Do you want to take a break for a minute, or do you want to move on to season 7?
Let's keep going.
All right, let's look at season 7.
So you need to take a step away for a minute.
Nope. I just don't want to impose on you more than absolutely necessary here.
Managed to find me at a time when my schedule was fairly open.
Season 7. So this is the end of the first episode, Fallen, where Jonas has been taken by Anubis.
Yeah, and held in this pillory. I just want. I mean, this is kind of like the stocks that they put you in town square and throw tomatoes at you with a little variation. So
Yeah.
we lined the inside of this with felt, I believe, so that hurt our actor and worked like a charm. Looked pretty cool.
He's comfortable while he's being tortured.
Yeah, you have to be, right?
Fragile balance.
Loki's ship. Yes.
Interior.
Once again, an illustration just to show all the other elements were designed by our draftspeople via Bridget. That big window to space was a physical build.
Yeah, this was from season 3, and then this was from the end of season 3, and over here was from the end of season 3, and then you've got this back here from the end of season 5 with Heimdall, and so you're kind of basically incorporating all of the Asgard elements that have been established at this point, many of them, into one set.
And I think that's what drove the set is from a cost standpoint. It's like, okay, well, what do we got in the lockup? What can we bring in and put together this supposed to be this small renegade ship that Loki's taken and is messing with people.
So this is from
that's not my drawing.
Oh, okay. So this is the exterior of Loki's ship.
And there's the little window.
Right down the front there. Absolutely.
Apparently that room is right inside that raised section. And I think it was fairly close to this at the end of the day. I was trying to lean into the swoopiness of the back and those raised sections at the rear with the fin, because that's really all I knew of the Asgard.
Yeah, it's a lot of apple core shapes, like that kind of cutaway.
And then I put this thing together for them that became a pencil steel build that hung over their heads, which is supposedly and
like a dissection device.
Yeah, a little details on tools themselves. Which I kind of had fun with. It's fun drawing metallic surfaces for what it's worth.
All right. Orpheus, so the gold ring transporter.
Yeah.
So this is something that was introduced in the feature film, and you brought back to life here.
Yeah. Well, it also... See, this is a weird thing. Where I'm trying to remember now.
It's on the gauntlet.
Yeah, but was it not taken? I'm trying to remember. At one point, No, I'm thinking of a different episode. Sorry, I was going back to when our Ashrak our assassin.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he'd stolen one of the GDOs. That's why we didn't want him to go through Stargate.
Quite possibly. I'm a little fuzzy on the details myself. So,
and that's why it just made me wonder if I was just doing something small to adapt this, and it was already a pre-built prop. Don't remember. Anyway, there you go.
So on
this word.
Orpheus, we've got a gold mothership being built in atmosphere.
Anti-grav dry dock.
Yeah.
And we did something to disable the anti-grav and the whole ship crashes. There it is laid over our location. Laid in over our location. We're probably too small. Or another location.
You guys filmed in pretty much every pit in the greater Vancouver area.
And now they don't exist.
Yeah.
So it was a good time for us to be able to do these things. Oh yeah, I have a little work to do to finish that one. Another one of those. Well, time does not allow. Therefore,
right.
So, yeah, I've cut it out around the trees, and I've not had the ability to go back and clean those areas up here. But it was just the idea of showing one of the anti-grav pods exploding, and I don't know if it exploded in the final or if it just kind of turned off.
Yeah, it explodes. I think it explodes like behind the hill. At a certain point, where can you get comfortable with it yourself? Where it's like, okay, I've achieved the gist of this to communicate the idea. It may not be as clear as I'd like it to be, but they're going to get the direction that I'm going with this.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, this could have been just close up on the corner, except then what is it? So you got to go wide enough to show that, okay, it's the ship and it's that part of it that's having a problem.
Right.
So it says what it needs to say. Whether it's strong enough to be direction, I don't know. But, now we're on to revisions.
Revisions, the link.
Did a bunch of these little things, whole bunch of different designs before we finally, I think it was the second from the bottom. That was not quite right. It's there. Yeah, that was the final version, I think.
You give measurements and everything. The batteries, and they made this thing light up. Even back then, that was still mind-blowing to me.
On the model shop.
Man.
Gordon Paco were just, and all the people they had there with them, just so smart. Able to put together pretty much anything I could dream up. I was never able to stump them happily.
Some of this technology is that you guys have designed is prophetic, with Neuralink and everything else. It's a little wild. I forget who I was talking to. Oh, David Hewlett. Science fiction is our dream phase.
Well, it is. I mean, our art emulates reality, or the other way around, whatever it is. But I mean, go back to Flash Gordon,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
spaceships going to the moon. How freaking ridiculous is that? Right?
Not so ridiculous at all.
Cut to, or Star Trek, the original,
yep,
with the communicator device, which now everybody carries around with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that the iPad is called the iPad, personal access display device from Next Generation. Steve Jobs wanted one. He designed it before he designed the iPhone. It just took him a little bit longer. That's what that is.
Really? So the language comes from the show. I was not aware of that. That's cool.
There's Michael.
Yeah. So this is one of those cases where I, tried to hit the mark with the likeness, and enough that we knew who it was with an explanation. And then this headset, which he never actually wound up wearing. I think they used some sort of temple, almost like the ones you put on when they're monitoring your heart.
Yeah.
I don't know what the decision was on that, whether there's just blocked too much of the space, possibly. But regardless, it was a fun build.
It's cool, and you can see kind of like the echo in terms of like the Galarian memory technology later on in the show when you had the little blue diodes that you guys put on everybody on their faces.
And that was supposed to be a little sweetheart inside one of the pods.
Yeah.
Didn't go well.
Nope.
Yeah.
Mummified pod occupant. Quite possibly their leader, considering the all of the nice. I don't have a very clear shot of this one, but
yeah, just a ruined corridor. It had been holed out, damaged, whether that was part of what caused the crash or that happened in the crash. And I know I'd done versions of the crashed ship. There's the corridors that sort of go on forever. And I'm not sure if we used green screen to extend the sections of corridor that we had, but they were not that long. So, and there it is. So I did two versions of this, and one of the versions I did looking the opposite direction. There you go. And I like the idea of showing this big swath that it cut when it landed or crashed. But this was too damaged for Brad. It's like, no, we need people to live through this.
Right. Yeah, this reminds me of Pitch Black.
They went back to something closer to the first drawing for the final rendering prison decks. And another person in the pod, obviously not finished and worked out. And the pods, I mean, the pod design was done by drafts people. That's why the pods are easily finished, because I got their renderings.
Okay.
And then this.
Is this like the ship being assembled? Like a vision?
Well, it looks remarkably similar to that ship with the outriggers. But I have a feeling this may have also been one of my roughs from
Season 6?
Nightwalkers.
Nightwalkers, okay.
Could have been one of them. I had 2 or 3 stabs at what the ship warehouse was.
Well, you know, if you've got something good in the back of your mind, we can probably bring it to the foreground later on, like Space Race.
Yeah, if some of them work, then there's no wasted drawings, as I say, because they either set you in the right direction or there's something that you can repurpose down the road. And this is
This is from Enemy Mine.
Yeah, I don't recollect the context of these builds.
So this is Unas have taken over this planet. You did one in charcoal as well.
Yeah, I remember doing the drawings. I just don't remember the specifics of the episode.
Okay. Yeah.
Story wasn't how it played.
Unas rebelled against their Jaffa slave their Jaffa slave masters and took over the planet. All right, Space Race.
Space Race. That's the drone, right? Got the killer drone. Yeah. And those actually were rendered fairly close to what I presented them with. And once again, I mean, asymmetrical shapes like this, so quickly done in 3D. And the ships themselves, I reverted back to pencil.
So they introduced 7 or 8 different pilots, and each pilot had his own ship. This is our bad guy.
Jarlath, yes.
Jarlath.
I don't think that one made it through the race.
Yes, it did. Oh, not through the race, but into the production, yes.
It definitely didn't.
Yeah, definitely.
Did not make it through the race.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, a bunch of different concepts and stuff. Some were used. I believe Mr. Botnara supplied a couple for us as well.
Reminds me of Independence Day.
Yes, perhaps. Had that movie come out at this point?
Yep.
Okay. I had 10 years of not being able to go to the theater because I had back problems from a car accident. It would not allow me to sit in a chair that long.
Wow.
So many of these movies, people are like, oh, well, you should see this. You should. I haven't seen any of that stuff.
Wow.
So, and oddly enough, too, I'm just going to totally sidestep. When I did Universe and I started doing designs for the doors on the Destiny, I had a whole bunch of people going, oh, that's just the door from X-Men. Well, to all those people, I had never seen X-Men. So for what it's worth, we all have similar designs. If in fact they are similar, I still haven't seen it.
I can see the echoes of Cerebro, but I think that yours is yeah, I wouldn't have made that comparison. You have a circular twist in a lot of different doors, so.
But, and yeah, it was kind of a necessity. So, there you go. There's some more Etan Mayo. Shield generators, yeah. So Hellfire pulse missiles, you got to have.
And the Cerberus.
Cerberus, of course, which is the interior we saw earlier.
Yep. Hebridean. Yeah, the humans and the Serakin, and some of them were interspecies offspring. So Hebridean.
Well, and as I recall, not the only perhaps, but the strongest portion of this drawing that made it into the final Visifex was the pyramidal building in the foreground. I believe that's in the map.
And the rails. I know that Rainmaker did this shot.
Raised highways. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's that's not mine.
This is not yours? From Birthright?
So Birthright, what year is that?
That's season 7. This is Christopher Judge's episode with Jolene Blalock.
I think this was drawn by others.
Okay.
Pretty sure. That one I did.
Evolution.
Loved this episode. Oh my god, I had so much to do in this episode.
Oh yeah.
There you go. The waterfall, which was their clue to where the Telchak device.
The Telchak device. This is Honduras.
There's the poisonous frog in the foreground.
You didn't often create Earth content.
No, I did not. But it was fun. was fun to do this. I liked getting into the textures. It felt like painting, which is my first love. Shackled Drone, a little design for our illustrious Jaffa super soldier being held. That went through, was revised, but fell through. This did not make, I mean, there's elements of this that went into the final, but this was not really what they looked like when the story was done. Especially the shoulders and rear view. I guess that's pretty similar. Patterning on the, created all the patterning that was to go on.
Circuitry.
Theoretically, that's what's inside these things. They all kind of look similar, and we had prosthetics made for Dan Payne again.
Yes.
Like their Jaffa warrior. Yeah, so not an attractive bunch. With the plate on, or the breathing thing on, with it removed. And this is the plasticine sculpture that I did over a couple of, possibly a weekend. I did it at home and brought it in. So that set a lot of the feel for the sculpting of the helmet and the armor, what have you. We lost the nose ring. They didn't like that.
Yeah.
Everything else pretty much played. That for a couple pounds of plasticine, huh? Yeah, Robert Cooper goes, "You sculpt too?" Like, do art stuff. Yeah, so variations of removing the gear to reveal the man underneath, the drone underneath.
So you had this a couple of months ahead of time to develop?
The concept for the suit itself, yes. And then
okay.
It took me 4 weeks to get all of this stuff done and sculpture done, and then 4 weeks, I believe, beyond that to build it. 4 weeks and roughly $80,000.
$80,000. Man,
that's my recollection. That number might be off, but it's pretty close.
Dan Payne said because it was molded to his body, that neoprene suit and then the pieces over the top of it, he said it is the most comfortable thing he had ever worn.
Until we took him out on day one in 30+ degree heat.
Yeah.
And he almost went down from like he literally took off a glove and poured. We had to sit him down, crack open the back of the suit, and put ice packs all over his back and stuff to rehydrate him and keep him cool.
And he wouldn't complain.
No.
Like, you need to let us know when you're about to pass out.
So, oh, look, we've killed him.
Jeez, that's the thing,
Yeah.
All right.
No check device.
I've got this on my set. Well, not this one, the one from 200, but what a wild design.
It was fun. And once again, all in 3D. Did it in 3D. Didn't know how easily or difficult it would be to realize this as a physical build because it goes inward from all directions. But once again, the model shop, they were the bomb.
The one in Evolution 2, 1 and 2, is all the effect is always digital, but you guys managed to make it practical for 200.
Yeah, it was fun. And then I once again used my renderings as summaries from their investigating the device. I was told that these wouldn't be really featured heavily. Little did I know. But
extremely dangerous.
Very dangerous. Don't mess with these things, whatever you do, because it gets lighter every time it does something. I mean, I was just making up silly crap all the time. For the most part, they allowed it to stay in.
Tartarus.
Oh, yes.
Evolution 2.
This is where the big gathering of the super soldiers were. I knew the sun's floating. Is that right?
Yep.
So I did a bunch of different variations and versions of this, partially for the planet around it, partially just to try and redefine the building. But I think it went through pretty similar to this. And there's the armies.
This is pretty accurate to the final shot.
They stuck to my stuff quite a bit. As we noted earlier, not always, but
when it works, it works.
Really similar. And yeah, there's this little floating guy is addressing. They all kneel to one, right? There, you got the glowing eyes.
Looks like a Jawa.
Right?
OTD. All right. All right. More 3D content for Prometheus. I believe this is Grace, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And I did a few different designs for the Grace ship too, until I came up with one that but they needed this stuff for Sam was trapped, right?
That's correct. All by her lonesome. We never get the name of this species, and it drives me nuts. Because what do we call it? The Grace ship? I guess it's the Grace ship.
And there's the relative scale between them, which I recall they actually made it even bigger. So
I think so.
Itty bitty, about the size of my signature there. half again what it was, so they doubled the size.
It just suggests how big our galaxy is. That there can be whole civilizations with massive technological advancements in our galaxy that probably have never even encountered the Goa'uld, quite possibly. Galaxy's a big space. More Prometheus.
A couple more of those, which we've seen before. But once again, I mean, choosing to do this digitally with a 3D program served me over and over and over. Wow. I had no idea how much that I'd be able to utilize the wireframe generation. Oh, there's Prometheus on its rails, as I kind of envisioned. Never happened. It still formed a window similar to what we've done with other ships.
Break through the nebula.
Yeah, but, all this NASA stuff's public domain, so I could use it.
Oh, absolutely. Obsidian tablet from Chimera. I've got one of these. Hang on. The model shop's ability to recreate your content is ridiculous.
Kind of looks like something I drew once.
Just kind of, right down like to the little the damage in the surface. This is one of my. This is a replica. This is what happens when the molds get into the fans' hands. They start hammering these things out, and it's just one of the coolest things. I would think that for me, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, to draw something and then to go down to the model shop and to have them completely realize it in 3 dimensions has got to be wild. Martin Garrow always said it was amazing.
And they did it time and time again. And then once I was the designer, I'm walking around in spaces that I drew, a couple of weeks before. And that's the real film magic, and because I'm still involved in that magic, right? It's not just like for the audience anymore. I get such a kick out of it. The first time that I walked into the Destiny set when it was completed, I couldn't find my way out. I mean, it's like,
and you designed the thing.
Exactly. It's like, okay, so if I get on this one now.
That's wild.
It is. And every prop that I would build, they would just, or design, they would come out with it, as you say, almost verbatim, if you will. So that just is a testament to the skills of the people that I was surrounded by.
All right. Heroes.
Yeah. Pokey little bits. That's from the Goa'uld drone.
This guy right here.
Go. I liked him too. He was a fun little build.
This is one of the rare examples. They theorize that the Goa'uld have kind of gone in the direction that the humans have and made their own Malps. So this is kind of like a Goa'uld version of human technology, which is rare that it goes in that direction, but it's quite possible that they've learned from us.
Very possibly, but with their own unique design aesthetic.
Oh, of course, and theirs has weaponry, so
Otherwise, you don't get your Malps back. It's all defensive, I'm sure.
You even got texture on it here.
Oh yeah.
They were pretty transparent with the with making that the same. So, and then there's an exploded version of it that Sam's working with that has crystals inside of it.
Well, this version, when it was floating and it was just in the air, that was always 100% Viz. And then once it got shot down, we had bits that we had to go through. So the model shop created those for us.
The Ark, Gould Ark.
Oh, nice.
I love this. This is so cool.
Me too. I mean, I enjoyed doing it. How far wrong can you go when you rely on Egyptology for your design aesthetic, right? It was beautiful then, and it's beautiful now.
Mm-hmm.
We just kind of repeated it and then added in a little bit of our own Gould text and language onto it, and our crystal technology, which theoretically was there. But I mean, this is that comes from the brilliance of Dean Devlin and the boys way back when, deciding that this is how the story was going to unfold from ancient Egypt, and being able to carry that aesthetic all the way through and the oiled ships and everything else. It's just beautiful. Lapis and gold.
Absolutely.
How can you go wrong?
You turn the beetles a certain way, the scarabs, and it unlocks it.
Yeah. So, and obviously, I had a number of notes in scripts as to how this thing was supposed to operate. So that allows me to design and then put in these notes that basically just address script elements.
Absolutely.
And then this one, Bridget built that lower section of claws as a set that I think had a face hugger in it. Face hugger, whatever it was, face hugger. And that was all realized, obviously, as a viz behind. And then once we're into it, into the set portion, because it had back walls, we could shoot it practically.
Right. They go in here. This looks familiar, too, from the beginning of season 6.
Yeah, Bridget wanted to bring a couple of those back and place them in there. Okay. So I needed one of them for drawing. Pretty sure they were there in the episode as well. And this is where Mr. Jackson made his re-debut. He was found at the base
this was Fallen.
Yes, this is from Fallen.
Oh, excuse me. All right.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
We're a little out of order, folks.
It did a straight down shot, and there was ruins and part of an aqueduct. In my renderings, I believe they put part of the aqueduct into that down shot of,
this is Visuban.
Daniel lying naked, having unascended.
Unascended, violently.
Oh, and then the chair.
Now this is carried, for a long time throughout Stargate history. How complicated was this to create?
Well, I mean, it was a chair, so
yes.
Beginning, it doesn't fly through space or do anything. I think that's my first rendering on top left, possibly. I mean, I did a few drawings of this. Some of them never made it even onto paper, other than in my notebooks, I think. But that was just to give them enough to build from, and then they did it once again. And there was a gel, I believe, in the hand they had to immerse their fingers into to make the connection.
Yeah, like little Christmas lights or something underneath it, like little button inputs.
Yeah. So I mean, and once again, it's amazing what they can do, because they reproduce my drawings very, very faithfully, right down to that sort of scooped out designs of the side. And then it all reclines. I always wondered if there was one of those massage functions.
I'm sure it had something like that.
Oh, lazy boy, you got it.
So in the original concept for Lost City, Atlantis was found in the ice, not just an outpost.
Correct.
So this is Antarctica.
This is Antarctica. This is the ship, and this was the first idea for the Atlantis map of the ship leaving. I would have to go back to the episode and see if they stuck to this, or if they I don't see. I don't think we were there with anything from Atlantis that was strong enough to model it to what Atlantis ultimately became.
Mm-hmm. The snowflake design isn't realized yet.
Not this. Yeah, not this. So I'm thinking that it was probably wide enough and be enough that it left them open to make Atlantis whatever they wanted it to. There's the ship taking off, heading back to the Pegasus galaxy.
Earth's moon.
Right. And now this is part of a set that was built underground. We built a physical portal piece on the floor from which our drones access, and went spiraling up to help in the battle that was happening above the ice. And that's the final designated design of the drone squids that the send out. They're starting out right there, and they go screaming up the tube. There it is.
This is so cool.
I had fun. I like that drawing. I have my favorites too. This drawing I quite like. It shows the motion, tells the story. These guys didn't want to.
No, they had no way of lasting.
There's the rough charcoal for it. So that shows the whole process completely. You look at that, and you go back 2 frames or 3 frames and look at that. There you go. So it's all just Photoshop.
Wow.
Just add color.
Just add color.
Results may vary.
A little bit earlier.
Yeah. And once again, that if you go back one, the initial one had been no, I'm sorry. Go forward another to that landscape with the clogged. That one. So if you look at that sculpture, the head of that is very reminiscent to those blue things that came in from Redemption, from the alien weapon Redemption, right?
Yes, very much so.
So those were just notes that basically said this is ancient.
Yes.
According to what we'd established at the time. That ancient became more of a humanoid form. And then I think in the final map, they actually took the head off it. So that, really.
Yeah, it had fallen, I think, nearby. Yeah. The 0 point module.
Yeah, I had a few designs of that prior to landing on this one. But, this is what it ultimately became.
Yeah, I wish I had the others. This is the only one that I've got. But talk about something that you guys got mileage out of.
Yeah. So. Ever ready money, baby.
Now, this is just the practical unit. Was that mostly different crystals assembled together underneath a lid? Is that how they arrived at that, or did they?
No, I believe they did an entire mold for the one. So it was a contiguous piece.
Okay.
It looked fragmented and fractured like this, like it was built from a bunch of crystals that had somehow morphed together. And then obviously it was hollow, so we could get lights into it and all of our GAC to make it work.
Wow.
But yeah, that was a fun one. 0 point module.
That's it, man.
That's it. That's all.
That's all of them. What a James, thank you for that. That was so cool that we were able to go through those together. What a wild assortment of content that you created in just those 2 years there. Looking back on all of it, can you believe you got through it at the time that you had?
You know what? The days were a joy. I would come home most nights, and after showing, I hate traffic, so I would leave early at 4:30 or 5 in the morning and be one of the first people to get there, and work until 5 or 6, and then go home, and then I would work until midnight or so until I couldn't see anymore, until nothing made sense. Then I get up and do it all again the next day after about 4 hours. I only sleep about 4 hours at night. So.
Oh my gosh!
But that's perfect for film.
That's true. That's true.
Sleep for beginners. That's my motto. So I mean, I loved it, and I was very fortunate that I had a very, very understanding partner who allowed me to be immersed to the level that I was in this show, and therefore provide. But the first 2 of the best 10 years of my life.
Ah, wow.
Very seriously, I've never had a work experience like this, and I'm not just talking about the fact that I'm able to draw, surrounded by so many fantastic people, such great options, and freedoms. They got to trust me. I earned their trust, I'm guessing, after a while, and I had quite a bit of autonomy in putting stuff together and doing stuff. Everything still went through the process. But as I say, I've learned it from other productions, just how much of a thumbprint others seem to feel the need to put onto things, whether it makes sense or not. And there was very little of that at Stargate. It's like the egos weren't there. It's just like, what's the best thing for the story? What's the best thing moving forward? And financially and production friendly, all these things. So it was a learning curve for me at the time. I'd done film for quite a while already, but not to this intensity or degree. And as I moved up, it was now, art directing in season 7, as well as providing, and then kept the art directing until I became designer, but always kept the illustration because that's the only way I know how to design. So it was 10 years of me being able to draw and create every single day.
And the limits are only the limits of your imagination.
Well, my imagination and the finances. I mean, obviously it has to work within the film world, and that's where I would be pulled back on it on occasion. It's like, I think I alluded at one point to the Asgard graveyard that
yes.
I'd done, and it was this big, wide drawing, and I got into intricate details and all the debris fields and stuff, and they're just like, they couldn't realize it as a 3D thing. It was not economical to do so. So that one went bye-bye, but it wasn't because it was bad or nobody liked it. It was just unachievable. So, right. I'd start to get part of my brain working on that as I'm doing things like, no, I don't want to go there because it's not going to be something we're going to do. So the more production savvy I became as I did it, the better I was at getting straight from zero to the finish line, because I didn't have to step around my own mistakes.
Did
it wasn't cheap.
Did the financial restraints end up, you think, complementing the direction that your work went, or was it just something you were always fighting against to find that right line? Or was it like, okay, I've got it now, we can only render about this much probably, so I'm not even going to try to go outrageous with this?
Well, I would always try and go outrageous if I was able to, and I would get reined in. There would be certain things I'd draw that they'd just be like, Whispers was one of them where I drew some aliens and they're like, okay, now we don't want to scare the crap out of people. We just want them to be, it's not a horror movie. Okay, it's still primetime television.
Right, exactly. It is on cable, right?
So, I mean, that's part of the learning curve, but I don't think it was me being obstructed by the finance. I think it was me learning to work with the finance more than anything. And obviously the responsibility for that increased the higher I went in echelon. So by the time it came time to build sets, I'm very involved in, well, how much money do we have for this? And this, and that. So you develop relationships with the other department heads that will be weighing in on, well, that's going to be a bunch, and that prop's not affordable, or we can't make it do that, or what have you. So that's my safety net.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the having those relationships is what stops you from being the guy that is constantly producing stuff that's not working.
Right.
So,
but when the time was there and the budget was there, they could pull pretty much anything off, which is just and I imagine, like, as you moved on to like Atlantis and Universe, financially more and more could be realized.
Well, yeah, because there was an arrangement. We had 2 crews working or one crew, 1.5 crews, working both shows simultaneously. And we were able to share resources, which potentially frees up more money. But we were paying for almost every stage on the lot. We had the Thomas Effect stage. We had stage 1 we did later, we did time in. We had stage 5s and 6, which was all Atlantis, and then Atlantis became the Trinity set in Thomas Effects. And then we had the village at the back of the Thomas Effects stage, which was 3 stories high, both sides of the road for 150 feet or more. So you have that kind of resources, and the fact that they had the infrastructure over the years, they were able to do all of this in-house, and more became in-house. All our vis effects were in-house. The editing was all in-house. We didn't have to farm as much stuff out to other suppliers, and that cuts costs as well. So it was, like I say, it was like the aligning of the planets for that show to even happen the way it did. And I would love to see another alignment in my lifetime, but whether or not I'm involved in that, time will tell. I mean, the way things are looking right now, it's probably unlikely. But,
yeah.
I tell you, I would love nothing more to go back and draw Stargate for another decade. That would be like the best.
Well, it means so much to me and to our viewers that you spent so much time to us going through all these different concepts. It is a treat to get inside of your brain and see where a lot of this stuff came from. It means a lot to have you.
Well, I appreciate it, David. And it's been a pleasure as always. And hopefully down the road we can find another season to chat about.
I'd love to. I can't thank James enough for taking the time to sit down with me and go through all of this content. I've been wanting to do this for so long now, and I hope that he's game to come back for more, because this was fascinating. This part of the process is critical into creating these shows that we love, and so much of it makes it on screen, and some of it doesn't. And so going through some of these details and being able to see, how some of these pieces are made is just, I mean, you can't. I have no words. Thank you, James, for taking the time. If you enjoyed this episode, click that like button and help promote the show further. We have new episodes coming up on Dial the Gate this next coming week, and we should have them organized on dialthegate.com when this goes to air. This is a pre-recorded show. My name is David Reed. My thanks to my moderating team, Summer, Tracy, Jeremy, Reese, and Anthony. You guys make the show possible. And to my producer, Linda Gate-Gabber-Fury, as well as Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web. He is our web developer on Dial the Gate. I couldn't keep this show up and running without their help. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. I'll see you on the other side.